You're listening to the Remote Millionaires Podcast, the show for aspiring and established entrepreneurs who want to create and scale six-figure success online without being chained to a job, location, or computer. I'm your host, Tom Gaddis. Let's dive in. Aloha, Norm. Welcome to the Remote Millionaires Podcast. How you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you doing, Tom? It's an honor to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thanks so much. What's that?
Is this the first one or is it?
This is the first one I'm recording, but it probably will not be the first one released, but it'll be in the first few. So yeah, I'm excited to have you on here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So actually, I want to dive right in because I like to keep these episodes pretty tight. We want to try to bring value to listeners that are listening, right? Talk a little bit about what you're going on. So the first thing I want to ask you is, why don't you just tell listeners a little bit about yourself and about your business, who you are, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, aloha, everyone. My name is Norm. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, and I have been a website certified nerd and design junkie for the last 10 years. And I first came on with the Remote Millionaires as sort of an AGM site person, and I got into the Remote Millionaires Program in about November last year, I think it was. And since then, I have opened up my own agency, and I've hired my own 10-person team, and I'm doing things that back then I wouldn't have dreamed I would be doing now. So for me, I've been working hard, but I've been very happy with all the work I've been doing, which is for me. I can't say anything bad about it. It's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, well, it's been really awesome to watch you grow in the program, and like one of the things that we want to do with these podcast episodes is really kind of hone in on, what Nick and I call the remote millionaire lifestyle. And I really want people to see that, like, what we're talking about in this program and stuff like that, really, it's not like a pie in the sky kind of thing, right? Like, it's doable, it's workable. People get into it for different reasons. And I also want people to see that, like, look, the remote millionaire lifestyle, I think, is really achievable for just about anyone, right? And I know, Norm, you said, you're doing some web design. I loved your web design nerd thing. You're doing some web design stuff. You're doing those kinds of things. But let's back up just for a minute. And I want to ask you, like, just as an entrepreneur in general, right? Like, so you've had this desire to start your own business, to do your own thing. What would you consider your strengths as an entrepreneur?
So I think, my greatest strength is probably my focus, and also my ability to look at a bigger picture and sort of target different parts. Say you're building out an agency, you've got to cover a lot of different aspects of your business. So a good strength that I have is to look at each one of those and tackle them. Right. And instead of getting clutter and sort of getting confused with what you need to do, I'm very good at organizing myself that way.
It's interesting. A team. It's interesting that you say that, because Nick and I, we always, and this on our call sometimes, we always talk about the circle of focus, right? And one of the issues we see that a lot of people have, especially people that are trying to build a remote style, lifestyle, is their focus is super big, and they're just trying to do way too much right out of the gate, right? Like, Nick, myself, we didn't just spring, out of nowhere with this big, fully built out remote business. Like, it's been a process, and we followed the process and the system. And so we're always talking to people about keeping your circle of focus tight, right? We focus on one thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. And before you know it, you look around and you have this amazing business that you've built up, which is exactly the process that you're just talking about there. So I think it's interesting that you say that, the being able to focus in, right? Like, just do one task at a time. I think a lot of people feel like, and I know I certainly did in the beginning, felt like that was a weakness. Like, you look around and it feels like everybody else is doing a bunch of stuff and you're just working on one thing at a time. You feel like you're kind of moving slow, but the reality is you're moving in the right direction. And I know a lot of those people that I knew that were doing a bunch of different stuff. All of a sudden I had a bunch of things going and they were still like scrambling to try to piece it all together. Right. So I think there's something to be said for that circle of focus and just staying in on that. That's a great strength to have. And if you're listening to this, one that you should be cultivating as well in your own business. So Norm, what do you think is your biggest weakness as an entrepreneur?
My biggest weakness, I think, is trying to put too much on my plate, for sure, right? As you know, I'm always trying to load my plate up. And another one would be like, you're right at the edge, but sometimes you don't want to move forward, right? You're stuck. Well, for me, I've been a freelance web creator for a long time, right? That's what paid my bills for a long time. So, my mindset had to go from being the creator, the fulfiller guy, so to speak, to being the leader, contract getting guy, right? So, a bit of that mindset for me has changed where, we want to do all the work, but we have to sort of move that over and be the person that, pulls the trigger every day, right? When you run a business, you don't get to not do something that creates a sale every day. And you either learn the hard way or you learn that easily, right? So yeah, that's a big weakness of mine. As you know, I get up and I'm like, I got to call, HSJ, I got to call like 10 people today and try and sell them a website. But something in my head is telling me, you don't want to do that, right? I got a person sitting on the shoulder telling me you don't want to do that. But, once I start doing it, it's easy. But that's one of my biggest weaknesses.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I know I can, because I've struggled with that for a long time too, right? Taking those actions. And, one of the reasons that I really sought out building a remote style business was because of that, right? Like there are some things that just I'm never going to be good at, right? And I liked what you said. I want to spend a second and talk about this because, before you found Remote Millionaires, like maybe can you give listeners a little, you did a little bit there, kind of what your business was like before, right? You're doing web design, you're getting clients, but you're doing all the work yourself, right? So you're basically shouldering the whole load, finding people, fulfilling the services, doing all that stuff, correct? Yeah. So when you came into Remote Millionaires and we started kind of showing you this different way to run a business, right? And you mentioned it being like the contractor. And I think that's so important. It's almost like being like a general contractor, right? Like our job in this particular business model is to be the conductor, the person that is overseeing the different parts, different people doing the things that we need to get done in our business, right? Like for instance, prospecting and sales and especially fulfillment. And so I know when you came in, you're doing all that stuff yourself. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how Remote Millionaires help you shift that. Because you mentioned you have a team of 10 people. That's pretty massive. How did that kind of come about?
Well, I'll go into the shift in the brain. When I first came into Remote Millionaires, I was doing 1 or 2 website contracts. They're about a 6 to 8 week process, right? And when you're doing that, you are doing zero lead generation, right? So the whole concept of lead generation, when you step into Remote Millionaires and they're like, hey, here's a way to get leads. When you learn how to build websites and code and do all that, they don't teach you any of that, right? They teach you how to have the skill, but they don't teach you how to find your own leads and keep them coming in. Like, you should have a lineup there, but they don't teach you how to do that. So for me, that sort of mental shift with Remote Millionaires was basically like, you guys simplified it for me, right? You were like, the person like me is the person you hire. And, if you want to be, an agency owner, you need to put your mindset into getting your leads and what creates revenue, right? And you can't do like 10 websites at a time on your own. So, that simplified it for me. It's like, okay, I gotta find someone who can do websites for me, and then I can bring in the sales for that.
Yeah. So you're able to bring somebody in to handle fulfillment, right? And then that allows you to, we call inside the program, we call it the RPA, the revenue producing activity, which is getting the deals and doing stuff like that. So now you're mainly focusing on that, right? The revenue producing activity, and you're letting your team handle the fulfillment side of things.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've gotten, I think I mentioned in our channel, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, where, my website department, quote unquote, there's one person in there who I've worked with since it started. And then she's kind of able to take my brain out and apply it to that department. Right. And then for me, it's like, I don't have to worry about anything. She does the end of day, check in with me. She lets me know during the day about important things, but she can take it from discovery to finish, and I don't have to worry about it. Right. So I basically hired me, and that's reassuring,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know maybe somebody who's listening to this and they're thinking like, oh man, it'd be awesome to have a team, but it also sounds kind of scary to have a 10-person team. Like, what's your experience been with just managing that process and handling those people? Do you find is it particularly difficult, or has it kind of surprised you how easy it actually is?
No, it hasn't surprised me at how easy it is, and I think that different people will have a different experience with, as you know, I came from like running hotels and running sports arenas in the US and here. So, when you've got 300 people working under you, when you're 25, you get used to having to delegate and follow up and manage people that way. So for me, it was a natural thing. But for, in general, I think it's easier than you think. For anyone listening, it's easier than you think. That's why you go to Remote Millionaires, because you've got a great coach in there who is Laura, who teaches you how to build a team properly, right? And you still see people kind of stuck and struggle with team members that aren't sort of doing what they were hired for and stuff like that. And I think going through those hiccups really teaches you how to build a team properly. And some people have been in another profession where they learned that, they've learned it already, and then they're able to apply it easily, like me.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that you say that, because I do think sometimes when people are trying to make that transition from a regular job or whatever, maybe they're in a corporate environment, whatever it is, into a remote business type lifestyle, we tend to kind of discount the skill set that we learned from being in whatever those jobs are that we had, right? But I think there's something to be said for any job, any previous job, regular job experience you have, really, if you look, can translate into things and skills that will help you in your own remote business lifestyle, right? Like I know, for me, I was in the restaurant business as well. And there's lots of things about that have come in handy now that I've started my own business that I never would have thought would have mattered in the past, right? But just little things that you remember, things you pick up here and there. So I think that's good for people to know as well. One thing, what's like right now in your business, is there anything in your business right now that, like, what are you working on right now in your business? Like, what are you trying to improve in it at this moment?
So just a little bit of like a background behind that. I usually sell $6,000 to $20,000 websites. So for me, I've, instead of me trying to chase those website deals, I've sort of created tiers of my business where, I can sell SEO, or I can sell Google optimization, or like home services. I can sell that, but the process for those is different from a bigger contract, right? So, I'm about to announce soon in Remote Millionaires a big win where it's like, 10 grand a month plus for brand strategy. But Verbally, I have the okay for that, but until I do sort of a real like contract with them, I won't announce it. But that's a bigger end of what I do is brand strategy and content strategy. And a bigger company has hired me to do that. And it's more involved, but there's tiers to my business. So, home services, I've got a team member on that where he sets up the websites. And then I've got another basically appointment setter who calls the people and says, does all the management through that, gets all the details from the client. So I've got tiers of the business where, maybe home services are bringing in fast money, SEO is a MRR, recurring money. And then the bigger things are something that, you just continue to work on. And yeah, I forgot what the question was, but
no. That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. Good. That's awesome to hear. Cause like what you're talking about from, what I pulled out of that is like, because you're able to have this remote style business where you have a team and you're more like the conductor, right? Like you're able to section off different things that you're doing in your business. So you have some things that are generating cash now, right? Maybe they're not as big a high dollar, but they're cash generators. They keep the cash flow coming in, which allows you to focus on getting the bigger deals and grow those out as well. So you could never do that if you were trying to run a quote, traditional freelancer business where you're doing it all yourself, right? Like it's just impossible to do that. So, I think that's great what you're doing, segmenting things off like that, having different departments. That also works really well, just so with various services, right? So you talked about search engine optimization, you talked about Google business optimization. So, one thing that we do inside our business as well is that kind of segmentation off of the various services. So, we talked earlier in the episode about circle of focus. So like we'll decide on one service we're going to roll with. Like for us, like like we rolled with websites out of the gate. We got that down, right? Once we had that process in place where we could, we were closing the deals. And by the way, in our business, it all works hands off for us, right? Like we have somebody, just like you said, like you're setting up. We have an appointment setter that does all the appointment setting. We have a person that closes the sales. We have a project manager that handles the deal. We have a fulfillment team that does that. So it all happens without our direct hands having to be in there, right? But it didn't start that way. That's a process. And once we had that process in place for websites, then we were able to build that. It's pretty much the same process, right? You need the same kind of things to do that for SEO, and then to do that for social media management, and then to do that for paid advertisement, all services that we provide inside our business, right? But you have to, again, circle of focus, start with one, and then build those others out as you get those processes in place. So Norm, a couple of other questions, and then we'll wrap this up. So one is, when you're trying to build a business, sometimes it's hard to stay motivated. So what do you do? What keeps you inspired and motivated day to day? Any tips or tricks for listeners?
Mm-hmm. Well, so just to give you guys the audience a little bit of background behind me, I've had 2 transplants, 1 stroke, 11 surgeries on my stomach area, diabetes my whole life. So a big motivation for me is health, right? Like you can't do this if you're unhealthy. So, that's a given for me every day. And then I think it's important to audit your time and really be honest with yourself for, if you need to get healthier, if you need to be motivated at the end of the day, you've got to put some time in there to really focus on, because motivation is not always there, right? Like, but if you put some habits in there, you will definitely be successful with whatever you're trying to do, right? And so, yeah, for me, I look at my dog, as you know, I show my dog a lot. I hike with my dog, I walk with my dog, I exercise every morning. I get up, I go to the washroom, I look at the exercise room area, and I'm like, God, I got to do it, but I go do it, right? And so any of those things for me motivate me, and I'm always trying to improve. I'm like a show off. I'm always trying to improve what I'm doing and get better than I was yesterday. Doesn't always work, but that's what my mind says to me.
Yeah, that's great. And I do agree with you that the health is so important. And if when you're in the kind of business that we're in, where we're doing technical stuff and spending a lot of time in front of a computer, it's important to forget, or it's easy to forget that we need to get out and enjoy the sunshine and recharge our batteries and pull our focus back in so we can go back in and work. So, and awesome to hear you got through all that stuff. I mean, that's a lot of stuff to go through, right? And to see you,
easy.
To see you plugging away and doing what you're doing, that's great. Yeah. Okay. So another question is, what's been kind of one of the biggest takeaways or lessons you've learned from the Remote Millionaires strategy that we've been teaching in there?
Biggest lessons, I think, the team building part, there's a lot of good nuggets in there from Laura. I think with my experience, they reinforced what I already know. But I think the sales training was a real eye opener into how to get better sales, right? And control your lead generation process. I think that's a good mark for me, where my eyes opened, right? I was like, God, I'm doing this all wrong. So the sales training was a really good takeaway for me. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because it really is an eye-opening thing when you realize lead generation doesn't have to be as complicated as you thought it was. And then from the sales side, when you realize look, it's not like I'm talking to people that want what I have to offer, right? There's nothing to be scared of there, right? They're looking for me just as much as I'm looking for them. And when you realize that that's the case, and then you have a process and a system in place to identify those people and move things forward, it really kind of you just feel this kind of weight come off your shoulders, and you're like, oh, okay, this is how it goes, right? And you're just able to do that repeatable process over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I still don't like to get on the call and call people, because I feel like I have, other work to do, like build a website or something, but that's just how my brain works. But when you do it for 3+ months, eventually you realize you're pretty good at it, right? And you talk to people, and they're giving you cues of what they're how they're reacting to what you're saying, right? And that kind of reassures you that you're doing something right, and you're not being a salesperson, you're being a human, and you're just speaking authentically to them.
Yeah, exactly. And now you have that process down. You'll be able to really easily find someone and train them to do it the way you do it, because you have the process down. So that's even more powerful, because pretty soon you'll just be able to remove yourself from that situation. So, all right, Norm, final question. What words of advice would you tell anyone who's listening to this podcast that wants to, achieve what you've done? Any simple words of advice to get them started?
Yep. So the first thing I would say is come to Remote Millionaires, because you're going to learn a lot of things that you thought you knew, but you didn't know. And you're going to learn how to do them properly versus scramble around trying to figure out how to do them. And then second, I would say, really, in this business you're trying to create, you're the X factor, right? So anything you put in there really is what you get out, and if you're not willing to, put in some extra hours, focus a little bit, take off your visors a little bit and look at the bigger thing and focus, then that's up to you. I'm just saying, you're the X factor. It's all up to you. You've got to put in a little, you've got to dedicate a little bit of time and invest in yourself to make it work.
Awesome. Well, Norm, thanks so much for coming on the Remote Millionaires podcast. A ton of golden nuggets in this episode. So you should go back and listen to it again, take some notes, if you are trying to build your own remote business. Norm dropped some really valuable stuff. Norm, thanks again. Appreciate you having you on.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate you having me on. It's a great honor to be here and talk about all my stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Look forward to you crushing it some more. And if you're listening to this episode, Norm and I really appreciate that. We'd love for you to go to wherever you listen to this podcast and leave us a 5-star review. And you can check out more information on the Remote Millionaires podcast at remotemillionaires.com. Until then, I'll see you in the next episode. Stay safe out there, everybody. And tune in to Remote Millionaires, where we'll teach you how to build wealth from anywhere.
Bye-bye.
Hey, if what you've heard today on the Remote Millionaires podcast resonates with you and you want to continue the conversation, then I want to personally invite you to head over to remotemillionaires.com and schedule your free Remote Millionaires business development call. We will analyze your business and show you exactly how to accelerate your results and build a wildly successful business you can run from anywhere. Until next time, Tom Gaddis signing off.